This is from John Padfield. Greetings from longtime resident and voters in Solvang and voter in Solvang. I would like to urge the council to pass option 1 regarding the urban growth. When our TOT revenue is severely impacted along with numerous other revenue streams the city has been able to rely on in the past. As the saying goes, time is
Communications received, I have only given you the ones to be read into the record that specifically say read into the record, which is what we have on our instructions on the web.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the public out there knows that we did get a number of emails in support of option number 1.
Yes, and they're here available for public review as well.
Perfect.
And I'm getting complaints right now that the live stream is not working. Is that?
Yes, that is correct.
I think it's YouTube. I'm going to restart it again so they'll stop the checks again.
Okay.
I'm recording it in 3 places, so I'll make sure it's all okay.
So should we just
Jeremy,
give it?
do you need a second to restart?
I just restarted it, so
Okay.
I'm checking now to make sure.
Why don't we just take a 5-minute and let that get resolved?
Sure. Thank you.
can bring them. I just like to have them, because people are always.
My wife wants to know if you're wearing a robe.
There used to be tattered out. This cute little hat.
I get commentary throughout our meetings. Plus, we always turn this place down to 34 degrees for meetings. No, it's him.
Novelty other than just the summer science and wisdom.
Okay, we'll go ahead and resume. You read the letters into the record, and then we're coming back for council, right? And then, is there anything?
No other public speakers?
Mr. Mayor, may I just add one more thing that I should have covered in my staff report?
Yes.
So there is a provision that allows for public facilities. Specifically, interestingly, your wastewater treatment plant is not in the city of Solvang and has never been annexed to the city of Solvang. One of the things that I did discuss with the proponents and their attorneys is that this would allow the city to annex the wastewater treatment plant into the city. And so I think that's an important provision that's in there.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions to the council?
That was foresightful. No.
Who would like to start?
I will. So this is actually a project that many of us had on our platforms. And I know that often change with preservation can be very difficult. And I think that this gives us an opportunity to maintain our quaintness without expansion. And this is something that I've been very passionate about and I've wanted to get done for a long time. And I really did want this to go on the ballot. I did want this to be, something that the city could vote on. However, due to COVID, and I listened to the arguments and I listened to Susan and Nancy, but I really feel that we could adopt this without having to have it go onto the ballot in November. And I think that the majority of our council members are supportive of this initiative, and there's been a lot of work that's gone into it. And I think the residents have gone beyond showing their support for this.
Thank you. Robert?
My only concern is that, and I agree with you, and I've talked to many people about this that are very supportive of this, and by letting it go onto the ballot, My fear is that we get accused of not being transparent on a lot of things and taking charge without the citizens' input. So that's why I was very supportive of Susan Bott and Nancy Emerson and others to put this on the ballot. If we put them on the ballot, we're going to be spending a lot of legal money, correct? And I know that the citizens support this. There may be some that don't, but I haven't heard from anybody. So I would be willing to as well support this and approve it tonight as the first point. Sorry, but I don't want to get accused of doing things without the citizens' input, because everything we do, it creates an uproar. And that's my only dilemma on this, because I do agree with it, and I think we should pass that resolution tonight. But I just know that there's going to be, it comes with the territory. There's going to be some anger that we didn't let the citizens decide on this. That's my only opinion.
And those were my only concerns as well, but I am willing to take fallout for voting a yes to adopt this tonight. I'm willing to take fallout from the residents.
And it would save us a lot of money.
Chris?
Unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, I don't know enough about this issue at this point, and I don't feel comfortable going forward with it. It's not because it's not a laudable idea, a laudable goal. I just don't feel comfortable with the way that we're doing this. I think that we made some horrible mistakes in the past with respect to cannabis, and I'll use that as a proxy because, unfortunately, the city did not take the time to communicate with voters across the entire city as to whether this was a good idea to move forward with cannabis or not. And we ended up with a really crappy law that had to be dealt with later on. I'm not saying this is going to end up that way, but the fact that we haven't taken the time as a community to discuss this, debate this, is a problem for me. I think that, and first of all, I want to applaud Susan Bott and Save Our Solvang for doing it this way. They've done a wonderful job in terms of trying to help us understand this issue and trying to bring it to the consciousness of the community as a whole as to why we should want to do this as well. But I still feel like there's a lot of heavy lifting that needs to be done before we, as a council, vote to make this an ordinance. And at best, I think this should be put on the ballot so that everybody has a chance to vote on this. If this really has that kind of support, then let's get the whole community to vote on this, number one. And number two, the thing that bothers me, I don't feel comfortable constraining and constricting future councils. I can't, again, I don't know enough about it, but I know that it's not, I wouldn't want that on our council. I think that maybe dealing with this as a policy measure as opposed to an ordinance would make more sense. In other words, we as a council want to use it as a way to guide our development going forward, as opposed to making this a hard and fast rule that we can't get out of, that we can't maneuver around. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea again. I want to make sure everybody understands it, but I don't think that this is the right approach, whether we make it an ordinance or voting on it this soon. I know they did a lot of good work in trying to get the community involvement on this, but I think there needs to be a lot more so that we don't have situations like we had with the Vets Hall and people say, we didn't know what was going on, even though we've been talking about this for 2 years, even though we've been talking about the Vets Hall specifically for 6 months, and it was discussed at the State of the City. So the idea that people don't know, well, maybe we need to do a better job of helping them to know, what is this? What are the ramifications of this? Before this council adopts it as an ordinance, why don't we have some more town halls on this? What's the rush? Why don't we, if it's really that great, why not just have an ordinance approved sometime next year? It could be in January, February. But at least we've given the community time to hear what this is about, the pros and the cons, and why we think it's a good idea as a council. I don't want to rush into this.
Can I add something? If you're saying move it to January, February of next year, then you might as well have the vote instead of
No,
drawing
what
it
I'm
out.
saying is, if you're going to adopt it as an ordinance as opposed to putting it on the ballot, then why not have the town hall meetings and then have an ordinance vote sometime next year, January, February, after we've had a chance?
I'd just like to request the city attorney clarify, because I think there's a misunderstanding.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that option is not available. The options that are available are to take action this evening, either to adopt the ordinance as presented without change, in which case it has the effect as though it were approved by the voters, or tonight or within 10 days of tonight, you can decide to put it on the ballot in November, in which case, if it passes by the voters, it will be the law of the city, and it will bind councils until December of 2040. Or, if you have some very specific additional information you feel you need in which to make one of those two choices, then you can direct me to go do additional work. I would need to bring that back to you by July the 3rd, in which case, again, you would need to take action then. One of the opportunities that absolutely is not available is to defer this until January or any other time of next year. You either take action tonight or within 10 days of tonight.
Okay. Daniel?
I would prefer putting it on the ballot. I think the work has been incredible. They've done a lot of research. They put this together. They've spent a lot of time, but I feel that the voters should have the chance to vote on this, especially with, I think Solvang has expressed the need for us to be extremely transparent, more so than ever before. So putting it on the ballot, I think, is the best approach to this, giving them all the chance to vote on something that's going to last for 20 years. So that would be my opinion.
Okay. I think that this has been a long-standing item. It's an item that, you know, became, I think, quite a campaign issue just last year when we all got elected. And there were those that were trying to push annexation, and there were those that, you know, weren't. I was there for all the hearings of annexation, so there was lots of public engagement on this item. It's very passionate, just like everyone's very passionate today about any form of change. Unfortunately, with that study and everything that I saw there was just nothing but taking away, you know, some of the things we value most about this community, and then throwing down a bunch of homes and other things and expanding our infrastructure, in which case in today's times, especially after the economic damage of COVID, I really don't think we have the capacity to be expanding services in some of these ways. So it really doesn't pencil out. It needs something different. There's lots of opportunities. I think this UGB still provides for lots of opportunities in the areas where that needs to happen. But I think it's also important for the community to understand that as much as they might not want urban growth or expansion at this point, or, you know, urban sprawl, you know, there's still a lot of costs that this city has to pay for. And we've held multiple meetings over this, in which case everyone has agreed that the city's, you know, the much needed capital infrastructure cost for the aging infrastructure the city has far exceeds our ability to pay for it. This isn't a time to be looking to push out to pay for it. This is a time to be developing from within. And, you know, there's been a lot that we've done to try to put pressure on getting things moving here in the city. I mean, there's, for example, we had the water wheel project that maybe Chip could speak a little bit about. But I mean, that thing sat there forever. And I think there's even like a $250,000 parking loan that was given on it or something like that. Everything around here was just encouraging places to basically sit vacant and deteriorate. And that does not pay for the services that this city needs to pay for. That does not allow us to pay for the sheriff's contract. It doesn't allow us to pay for stormwater management that the state has mandated on us. It does not allow us to pay for all the water meters that we just had to replace last year. And I'd like to remind everyone that we have been doing that. There's a lot of things we have been taking care of here in Solvang, but that is afforded out of the general fund. It's not coming out of the water fund. If those costs were to start coming out of the enterprise funds, you're going to see a dramatic increase in water rates. And I think we, you know, I don't have that email available to me right now, but I just got an email that Solvang's like it has now the lowest water rates in the county. When has Solvang ever known to have anything low when it comes to water rates? That is a historical abnormal for the city of Solvang. That is done by hard work and by finding ways to carve money and create opportunities. I know some of these decisions hurt, Cuts hurt, but that's what allows us to pay for these things. And that's what's allowing us to help take care of infrastructure that serves the people we take care of in the community. And it's really important now that as we go through, especially through COVID and the financial damage created by it, we have to find ways to develop from within what we already have without expanding out. So I think between all the hearings that we had prior to this council, I think that between this being a major campaign item that I believe most council members here campaigned on supporting. And I think that between all the work that's been put on here, I think that it's appropriate now that we just pass this. I think also that if the voters ever want to change this, they can run an initiative to remove it. They still have a vote. But I don't see anything happening in these current conditions about why anyone here would even care about this in the near future. So I'm in support of pushing this forward tonight, and I'll make the motion to move item 4A.
Wait. Before we make that motion, I want to ask one last question. So if we were to make this an ordinance, it would not go to the community for a vote. How hard would it be to overturn
It's
the
not an
ordinance in the
ordinance,
future?
Chris.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but it is in fact an ordinance. It already is an ordinance. The way that the petition initiative works is the proponents write a proposed ordinance of the city. And so there is a proposed ordinance of the city that has been written, was written prior to March. I then wrote a summary of that proposed ordinance. Both the ordinance and the summary of the ordinance are here in your packet, but it is already an ordinance. The way that the law works is you now have the opportunity to pass by resolution an acceptance of that ordinance. But again, it is.
But what I'm trying to clarify is it's not like a typical ordinance, in which case we can just put on the agenda the next meeting. And
It is very much
move this on.
not a typical ordinance. Again,
Can I add?
Wait,
also-
my question wasn't answered. Assuming this becomes an ordinance, right, that we adopt this, how difficult would it be to change it in the future?
the only way that it could be changed in the future is if there was, and you could set it for a vote, or there could be another initiative petition circulated. But the only way to change it in the future is it would require the affirmative vote of a majority of the voters of the city at an election.
So a future council can't just overturn it?
The very point of this being presented in the way that it was presented is so that a future council cannot overturn it. It must go to the actual voters of the city.
Another initiative could be written that could go on the ballot to remove it or modify it or do anything. A future council,
Yes.
or even this council, could put an initiative on the ballot to remove it or make an update or do anything.
Mr. Mayor, those things are both correct.
And if I could add one last thing.
Robert?
I think that Susan and Nancy did an excellent job of addressing a lot of different things, and the fact that ag could be annexed by staying ag, the fact that business development at the bottom of the hill by the lumberyard and Buell Flat Rock is already there. It could be changed for something else eventually, which is worded in here, and that the wastewater treatment plan is covered as well. So I think they've done a really, really good job of looking at all the possibilities and a lot of the arguments in advance. Again, I'm nervous about not doing a vote, but I think it saves us. And I'm not trying to be short-term by saving money now and putting us in a hole for 20 years, but it saves us a ton of money right now. And I personally, and I'm just one person, but I personally believe that the majority of the residents support this.
And again, a future council or initiative of the public can modify, remove, or do anything different.
So they could go through the same exact process to get this removed if they wanted to.
Right on. Okay, well, I will second your motion and
It's been
accept
moved
it
and
as
seconded.
presented.
Been moved and seconded. Mayor Pro Tem
Mr.
Clark?
Mr. Mayor, may I just to confirm, because the motion should be to adopt resolutions number 20-1110 and what will now be numbered as 20-1111, and which is shown in your packet as, I believe it Well, I'll just read the title of it. The title of the resolution is Resolution of the City Council of the City of Solvang approving and enacting the Urban Growth Boundary Ordinance. So as I understand that, that is what your motion was, to approve
I'll
those two
accept the
resolutions.
clarifications by the city attorney.
The second accept?
The second accepts the clarifications as well.
It's
Okay.
been accepted.
Mayor Pro Tem Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember DeJarnius.
No.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Waite.
Yes.
Mayor Toussaint.
Yes.
Passes 4-1.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 7.
Which is 5.
So,
Oh, is that, sorry, I think I have a different order here on my packet.
item number 7 is now 5, which was moved by your earlier
So
motion.
Solvang Brewing Company patio expansion, parking waiver, and ABC regulations.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's Solvang Brewing Company patio expansion, parking waiver, and ABC regulations. The specific recommendations or actions to the council are by motion that the city council review the site plan for the expansion of the outdoor patio. If we could mute folks on the phone.
Someone's
Senior?
having a good time. I'm glad we're so entertaining.
Yeah. Danya, before we begin, I'd like to recuse myself from this agenda item.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilmember Johnson recused. Okay, so by motion that the city council review the site plan for the expansion of the outdoor patio in order to address the social distancing requirements of patrons and affirm planning director's grant of a reduction in on-site parking of 2 spaces as allowed in the urgency ordinance and grant a waiver of additional 8 spaces as allowed per section 1111-9D of the City of Solvang zoning ordinance. Alternatively, the council could not approve the fee waiver or provide any partial waiver through fee reduction. Second portion of the recommendation is that the city manager be authorized and directed to advise ABC and any other agency with jurisdiction that the city supports and has provided for expansion of the premises to include the parking area as shown in the attached site plan, and that such expansion should include allowance for non-amplified music within such area, subject to regulation by the city. So as you would recall, you have passed an urgency ordinance on May 26th that allows for the planning director to be able to waive a requirement of up to 2 parking spaces to accommodate the addition or enlargement of such an outdoor patio or seating area, and or may allow for provision of all or some of the project parking to be addressed through payment of in lieu parking fee. We have received a request from the Solvang Brew Company that is requesting to expand the outdoor patio, which would take over most of the parking by the Solvang Brew or in the front on Mission Drive. And the request is to go from 12 parking spots to 2, which means that you would be potentially subject to your consideration waiving an additional 8 parking spaces, or a total of 10. Current in lieu fee is $12,000, $376 per parking in lieu space. So the total waiver would be $98,862. That is up to the council's discretion. It's here for you in public to make policy decision whether that's what you would like to do. And this is determined by staff to be in alignment with your prior direction to expand on experiential tourism, to expand patio spaces, and also in this case to accommodate the social distancing during COVID-19. Partially, this waiver could be offset by an additional sales tax that may be generated from this activity, which the city receives 1 cent of. And the considerations with the ABC are here because that's what the ABC needs, basically, to have a statement from the city, whether or not there is a support. And then the provision in terms of the non-amplified music is because this particular ABC permit has some restrictions on it, whereas other businesses do not. So that's clarified here.
Mr. Mayor, may I provide a couple of additional clarifications?
Yes.
On questions that did come up today. Just to make very clear, you are not approving the permit tonight. The city manager, as city planning director, will still be reviewing the application, imposing any appropriate conditions on the application, and then that will be approved. What you're doing is you are considering whether or not to grant the fee waiver that's been requested by the applicant. If you don't, then that might affect how they move forward with their application. But that's the primary issue. The second issue is that ABC, before they allow a liquor license or allow expansion of what's called the premises under a liquor license, requires that the city provide a letter of necessity and convenience. Your council, a few years ago, adopted a requirement that all requests for letters of necessity and convenience come to your council before they're provided to ABC. You may want to consider and direct us in general that for those that are patio expansions that involve an expansion of the premises, you may want to give us generalized direction on that, but I believe that we should do that at probably June the 22nd, if that is something you want us to do, and bring that back as an agenda item. But for this particular application, what we're recommending is that you go ahead and take that action now and allow the planning director, when approving the permit, which again hasn't happened yet and it will have conditions on it, let the planning director then at that time provide that letter to ABC. What I also would suggest is that on the issue of noise or outdoor music, that those are things that should be addressed in a permit for the property. And historically, oddly, your council has not done that. It has simply relied on the city's noise ordinance, and there is a belief that the city has a noise ordinance that does a number of things. The city's noise ordinance actually is only in effect after 10 p.m. on weekdays and after midnight on Friday and Saturday nights. So in this case, and I would suggest to you in all cases now that you are moving toward more outdoor activities, that the city, as part of the permit process, look at what appropriate conditions the city would impose to make sure that there aren't neighbor conflicts, noise conflicts, other conflicts.
Okay. And can you explain the waiver of parking in lieu fees? I mean, historically, it seems like that's usually done at the Planning Commission.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to excuse myself from giving an opinion on the appropriateness of how things have historically been done. Your ordinance is actually really very, very clear that the waiver of parking fees can only happen by the council and must come to the council. And when you approve the urgency ordinance 2 weeks ago, we made that very clear in your new urgency ordinance. And I'm expecting that when this goes through the Planning Commission process, we will reconfirm what has in fact been the law of the city, I believe, for I think about 2 decades, which is that no, any request for parking fee waiver of the in lieu fee must come to and must be approved by your council.
It goes to planning, who can make an opinion on it, and then it comes to us.
Actually, so if it is a project that goes to the Planning Commission, So if this were a major revision to a development plan, then the planning commission would make a recommendation to you.
Correct.
Because this is not actually now a project that goes to the planning commission, you've now, in this case,
Served.
what you've actually done is now confirm what I think was probably always the intention and was certainly the language of the provisions that allowed the planning director to grant minor exceptions. You've now confirmed that those minor exceptions are for 300 square foot additions to buildings, and that if it is not a building, not a structure, then the planning director can approve the expansion with appropriate conditions. Actually, may is the term. It used to be shall, so the planning director was required to take the action. Now it's a may. The planning director may also refer it to the planning commission. But in the instance that the planning director is considering approving a permit that has more than 2 parking spaces that are being removed, either the fee must be paid or the planning director actually, before taking an action on the permit, would refer it to your council for your council's consideration. So the planning director's next steps are dependent upon whether you approve the fee waiver or not.
Okay. Are there any other questions of the staff report from the council?
No.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all this evening. I'm David Brentz. My wife and I and our partners own Succulent Cafe next door. Generally speaking, we're pretty supportive of this project. Our concerns are, we just have a couple of concerns, really. Noise level for music out on the patio, since we only have some succulents that separate us, and it could be pretty noisy. Our second concern is smoking. Being a reformed smoker, I get it, but people are trying to have dinner. Smoking's a problem. And historically for Bruco, it's been a problem for their staff and customers that, smoke out on their patio. And because what happens when you drink, some people like to smoke. I actually have talked to Bill this evening, and he agreed that smoking and noise would not be an issue. So we really have nothing further to say. We just generally supportive of trying to make restaurants work in these trying times, and trying to do what we can to support tourism. But those two things are a concern for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
David, thank you very much for coming up and speaking to us. I appreciate you trying to work as a good neighbor with your neighbors, the brew pub. Just out of curiosity, we talked briefly a month or two ago about the expansion of your patio. Are you thinking about doing that too?
We've actually been working with an architect to draw plans and all those things, but our intention really would be to just add some tables on the slope section on the apron in front. But we are working with an architect to finish that process, and hopefully he will get that done, and we can send this over to the planning folks and just move forward. But it is we totally support being outdoors. Our seating capacity was cut in half on the inside. It looks like a crime scene almost. We have X's on the floor. There are people that were supposed to stand. And so, and actually we reduced our seating on the patio as well to try to accommodate spacing. So we are really working very hard to play by the rules, and it's a very difficult environment to navigate. So in what we've seen is that people feel more comfortable being outside.
Right.
And that's where they want to be. And we get it. That's why we live in California. So anyway, but thanks for listening to me. Those were our concerns, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any more public comment on this item? Jennifer, I'll let you.
Jennifer Sony again, Lions Peak. My question on this, my comment would be on what you're doing moving forward and taking the number of parking spaces, particularly when parking is at such a prime level in Solvang, which now in Copenhagen you've taken all the parking spaces away. But on this restaurant, all the terms of COVID-19, if you take the parking spaces away and once we resume, is this going to then become a permanent entity of what was once parking now becomes outdoor activity with a lot of noise and commotion,
Okay.
which I think granting something that's temporary is one element, but making it permanent is another.
Thank you.
That's all.
Is there any more public comment?
Any public comment online?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I yeah, I'll let you present now. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Make sure I'm part of public. Thank you. Okay, so good evening. My name is William Rogers, representing the Solvang Brewing Company. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having me. And I absolutely want to thank David and his wife for coming this evening and giving their piece, and everyone else in the audience as well. I would like to tell David that if we are granted the opportunity to expand into the parking lot, sort of by default, we can expand all of our non-smoking area to the complete parking spaces, because until now, we have no smoking in the restaurant, on the patio, but we don't have that much control in the parking lot. Now, it's sort of a default that we can fall into what the city's rule is on non-smoking. That it is our intent to be a no smoking area. That includes our staff, includes our customers. They're going to have to find somewhere else to go to smoke that is acceptable to the city. So that's a big number one. Number two is we absolutely want to be part of bringing commerce back to Solvang in a big way, with the one of the concepts being more indoor-outdoor activity and accessibility to customers, to locals. So to be able to expand out into our lot, we know that we can do some social distancing, and we want to be able to serve our customers in that way. And we know that it'll be a benefit to the city, and it'll be able to help us in a post-COVID environment. As far as the music, anything that we would ask would absolutely be sort of on an acoustic basis. We want to make sure that we work with our neighbors and our, that would be the businesses and the residents, to make sure that it adapts to the community. The ABC ordinance mandates that we have signatures from neighbors, and that would be businesses and residents, to agree with what we propose. And we would absolutely just want to follow that to the letter. We also would like to mention that anything that we propose and ask the city to help us with, we would give the same support to any other business, any other neighbor in the city. We don't ask for any special dispensations at all. We want to make sure that we all have the opportunities to rise in this environment. Let me check my notes. Those are my most important points. If anyone else has any other public comment that I may give a rebuttal to, I would be honored to be able to do that. But thank you for having me, and thank you for tabling this discussion.
Does anyone have any questions of? Bill.
Just comments, go ahead.
Okay.
And if I may clarify on the parking, I had it in the report, but I forgot to mention, but the city is currently, the council has already approved the parking study, so we are doing the parking study to address the parking needs of the city more holistically and strategically, because the parking in lieu ordinance really hasn't been that effective in taking care of long-term parking needs. And another point here on Mission Drive, there's actually only a handful of places where the parking spots could be taken over by patios, because a lot of that Mission Drive is actually within the Caltrans jurisdiction, so we wouldn't be able to take such action as we are.
Then I actually have a question for William.
And just to add on to that, I mean, we have the extra lot over here. It used to be the city would park a lot of its trucks in the public parking spaces, and we have a lot of trucks.
Yes.
So those trucks have now been, moved out of that area. That happened right before the impacts of COVID. So, no one's really seen the impact of that change there. But we are doing everything we can do to increase inventory, and that's even by having our own staff park in areas that don't pull from normal business spots.
Well, and we need to do that as well. We need to make sure that our staff and so forth, there's plenty of places for our staff to park, away from that parking lot, to not park in the public parking across the street.
Right. And I would highly
can
encourage that, because I get
accomplish
complaints
that.
about parking all the time when all the staff and the business owners themselves are using up those valuable parking spaces.
Yes.
There's also even Solvang Brew, I believe the elementary school behind us still allows us to use their lot.
You can't beat that. There are a lot of spaces back there.
Yeah, that's amazing. If
wonderful for
if people
them,
have
yeah.
their staff parking back there, I hope that's not the place they then go to smoke, because that would then cause issues. We don't
And
want
we have to tell them, we have to, sort of remind them constantly, please park away from, where customers and other folks may need those parking spaces and smoke elsewhere.
Right.
It's a policing thing within the company, so it's our responsibility.
And I believe our no smoking ordinance does exclude
The school.
public parking spaces.
School.
Yeah, the school.
Mr.
And
Mayor,
bars, I believe.
I couldn't
But
resist.
I'm trying to remember, because that went into place
Yeah,
some time ago.
you may want to sometime, as time permits, revisit your smoking ordinance, because I was surprised. It really is more directed at inside of, it uses the term enclosed areas, and then it defines it to basically be a building. So as you're going to have more outdoor living in the city, you probably should revisit your ordinance to have it be consistent. For particular projects like this one, as they come forward, if the applicant is saying that they are not going to allow smoking on the patio area, then you can simply have that included in their project description, and that becomes a condition of their project.
Okay, thank you.
That would, by the way, benefit us, where we could, actually tell our customers that want to smoke, it's a city ordinance. We are a no smoking company, and by the way, it's part of the city ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I think that was probably the intention. It's just, it's not very well written and isn't written that way.
And maybe we should reevaluate some of these, especially as we're making a lot of accommodations during the COVID situation, social distancing and things like that. So,
And I actually have two questions.
yes.
Mr. Rogers, obviously we get to phase 4, you're going back to normal, correct?
Yes, we hope so, yes.
Okay. And secondly, not specifically your restaurant, but if a restaurant, when city manager mentioned that we would be giving up $96,000, if we charged you or any other restaurant in lieu, it just wouldn't get done. No one's going to spend $96,000 to open up a patio for hopefully the next 4 weeks. And then we go into phase 4.
That is
and then-
correct.
And so that's, I think any city, any facility would not, it's not like we're losing $96,000, because if we allow them to open patio seating, and.
Well, you're technically increasing capacity, you're allowing that additional sales tax.
Correct.
generation.
We're
Correct.
absolutely
And
adding,
nobody
adding
would
to that
spend
sales tax.
$96,000 to open for another 4 months to add 13 tables in a restaurant. I just don't see it.
That is absolutely correct, and yes, and I would like the council and the mayor to consider that fact.
As a quick question, have you thought about, in percentage terms, how this expanded patio would improve your revenues? Again, in percent, like 1%, 5%?
The
in
number
sales?
one goal is to get back to where we were
Right.
with proper social distancing.
But assuming that
So
you could
knowing
get
that
back
we're
there.
losing 50% plus of the capacity within the restaurant and on the patio, when we double that space, at least we can get back to normal.
Okay, my question has to do, when we get back to stage 4, and you can actually have dining inside again, what would be the marginal increase and improvement in your revenue in percentage terms? I don't really want to get into your private stuff.
I think we can do 50 to 100% if we run our business properly. I also believe that it will benefit the other businesses in Solvang for us to be an optic. When folks come into town, they see more of the indoor-outdoor activities. My desire is to benefit businesses like my neighbors, the Succulent, the Wandering Dog, so forth, that we are a very active stretch of Mission. We have a great public parking space right across the street. I did not get it, this proposal, I did not add to it. I would encourage the city to add signage so that people coming into town from both directions know that we have a wonderful public parking lot right here. It does have a bathroom. It's perfect for all of our close businesses. I've talked to the folks across the street about petitioning you all for sidewalk dining, and I love the Succulents idea to have some sidewalk dining. I'm on board with the whole concept of make it optically more obvious that Solvang wants to use that California weather and all the wonderful things we have here. So we are indoor, outdoor more than just drive into Solvang, everybody's in the restaurant. Let's come on out and have a good time in the street.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a point about Phase 4 as well? My expectation, my understanding is that Phase 4 is still going to be with very similar limitations on social distancing and things like that. I would be very surprised if suddenly the governor decides that those were not good ideas. And everything I've read about going from Phase 2B to Phase 3 is Phase 3 is going to look exactly like Phase 2B. It's just that certain additional things like wine tasting rooms now get to open, but they will have the same social distancing, the same cleaning requirements, and all of those same requirements. And I think just from a reality standpoint, I hate the term new normal, but I think that at least for some period of time, even when we get to stage 4, we're going to have a need for additional outdoor social distancing opportunities.
And I would add, if I may, that with or without the governor's recommendations or allowances, it's going to be that way. People are going to want to just have a little more space. So that's why we want to have better access outside and ability to be able to serve indoor and outdoor customers. Just that extra leeway and that extra space.
So
I think
you're
it
going to be
will
more
remain.
like Denmark. Ironically enough,
sure.
the Danes love to be outside in the dead of winter with the snow and the rain falling around them. They just love their outdoors.
Hey, they like it in Hawaii too.
Well, that's
So,
a different story.
You know,
So, 2 quick questions. One, you said we're working on a parking study. When will that be complete?
So we would have been actually completing it very shortly here, but when COVID-19 happened, we had no parking to study. So we're going to kick back in this summer in July with the first sample, and then another sample a little bit later with some, it still won't be perfect as if we were back, a year ago. but we'll just have to make some assumptions based on what we're seeing in other areas and, modify those results.
But it would help,
to
it would help guide
extrapolate.
us in our decision here.
Right, so the idea of the parking study is to study the patterns of the parking, as I said, because we are not going to be fully open here in the summer. We can take the stats that we can obtain now and just extrapolate based on the activity before how many parking spots there would be. The consultant would review our parking in lieu and all of our parking ordinances policies and would come up with different strategies for how the city of Solvang could expand parking, how we could regulate it differently, how do
How
turnover,
we could pay for it,
how to
for example,
for it,
via
for
sales
example.
tax, I think you mentioned.
Well, there's different strategies on how you could create a way of paying for parking. So I think that is for future study to come
Yeah,
back
I-
and not an item on the agenda.
We gotta stick,
Mr. Mayor, you've got a
Yeah.
particular
Right.
item in
Yeah.
front of you on the agenda, and I think you're definitely straying.
Yep.
So thank
I
you
just
for
have-
having me,
I have a quick question.
Thanks, Bill.
Karen,
Council Mayor.
I have a quick question.
is your question of Bill?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Bill,
Bill,
I have a quick
so-
question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. This is very quick. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I just wanted to make sure. Wasn't your business put on suspension for a brief time for a violation?
Yes,
Okay,
we
so-
have an ABC violation. One was a noise ordinance, and that was from a year ago.
Okay.
So ABC came to us and said, hey, sooner or later, you're gonna either have to pay the fine or ride this out. We said, hey, we're not open right now. Maybe we should, consider, instead of paying the fine, to go ahead and ride that,
Okay.
that noise ordinance out. There was also an issue they had with the registration of a beer, and they said, give us all the paperwork. We've provided all that paperwork, so that was something they needed us to clear up that they did put in our restriction. We believe we've taken care of all of that, but the actual suspension of our selling of alcohol from that premises was a noise violation from a year ago, so.
So is that, when will you be off of suspension?
It should be on the 15th,
June?
yes, of June.
Okay, thank you.
And we propose with, kind of getting ready, ramping up, kind of seeing how business is reopening. We would like to reopen possibly the 25th. So we're preparing for that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
and
thank you.
so basically you have two options, like you can either just pay the fine and just keep moving on like cost doing business, or
Yes.
or in your case, you could take a suspension of
Of
you
a
know,
closed business.
of a closed
That-
business.
that is
which case I
correct.
think you would.
I picked that.
That is correct, and it was, yes, that was,
Okay,
that
I
was.
just wanted to
That was
clarify.
the route we took, and, getting everything else straightened out. So thank you for asking, Karen. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I'll allow one public comment. Jennifer?
Yes, and this pertains to, my business is a tasting room, which we've done the dine-in, and I am losing 50% of my operational space, in which I'm not sure what, I have 2,000 square feet, and the revenue should be probably substantial. Now, my question is, if you're talking about adding parking spaces, I'm on Copenhagen, there is sidewalk. You're talking in taking sidewalk. You're talking in taking parking spaces. Well, how many parking spaces is Lions Peak on Copenhagen able to come in to justify expanding my footprint? What kind of footprint are we talking about to all the businesses that we're going to allow for a loss of 50% of the margin of operating capital?
I mean, Chip, do you mind explaining? I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's
Mr. Mayor,
everything
may
that-
I, and I'll try and explain this one. Your city manager, I thought, gave a very good presentation earlier, but your council has approved a process whereby businesses like Lions Peak can come in on a very expedited basis. It's essentially showing that you have liability insurance. You can expand out into the sidewalk and the street in front of your property during this COVID emergency time. And so the whole point of closing the areas of Copenhagen was to give you that ability during the period of COVID to expand out into those spaces. And again, the city is on a, I think we're on an every month or so basis. As the rules change, we will keep looking at what we can do for businesses like yours under this set of rules. So I would urge you, if you come in and get the very simple encroachment permit, you can put tables and tasting and stuff out on the sidewalk in front of your business.
And on the street?
You actually can, again, request an encroachment permit. The whole idea of the design of closing Copenhagen was to allow for businesses to expand onto the sidewalk and have people go out in the middle of the street without getting hit by cars. And so I'm sure, though, if you have a footprint and an idea for something that you'd like to do, I'm looking at Zena. I know that she loves having people come in and say, here's my great idea. And the city would look at that and look at giving an encroachment permit. The attempt with the shade structures, parklets that are there, and the tables and chairs that the city has paid for the business owners along that section was, again, to give you all in that section an opportunity to expand your businesses consistent with the social distancing requirements, and so to benefit. And one of the things that was looked at was whether to allow other businesses to move over onto Copenhagen. The city, meeting with the committee that IDK has been meeting with, decided not to do that, to focus instead on the businesses that are on Copenhagen and give you those opportunities. So please come in and get an encroachment permit, and yes, you can.
All right, so with that, we'll take this back to the council for discussion and action. Who would like to start?
I just have one comment, because when people talk about the lack of parking on Copenhagen, we're at 5% of our, not even 5% occupancy in our hotels. And so there are not that many cars in town. And I did spend some time this weekend on Oak Street and Alice Hall, south of the post office, or south of the post office, et cetera. And there was an awful lot of parking available in and around Solvang until we start filling up these hotels. And I know those cars will be parked in hotels as well, but until we fill up the hotels and we get to phase 4, we're not going to have the traffic here. And I don't think that the parking is going to be an issue as people think it is.
If every business is cut down at least 50% in terms of the restrictions that we have right now, then where are all these cars coming from? So again, this whole thing is about trying to find ways to accommodate the restrictions that we have to operate under.
This isn't punitive. This is
Yeah.
trying to help the businesses in Solvang.
Okay. Any other comments on this item?
Yeah, my only comment or my only issue had to do with the parking. I thought the parking in lieu of policy was a disaster to begin with, and I'm glad
Arbitrary.
that we're capricious, arbitrary, you name it. And the way it was applied, that was a scandal. Having said that, I'm looking forward to that parking study, because unfortunately, as much as I really love what he's trying to do and others are trying to do, I think that's the direction that Solvang does need to go. How do we solve the parking problem? I mean, in the next 3 months, it's not going to be an issue.
So again, we're kind of
Mr. Mayor,
straying
may I
from,
suggest that you may want to set the parking study as an agenda item for a future agenda, so that you can
Which-
have this broad discussion about
which
the
it
parking
already
study.
is. So
But
again,
the problem is that in order to approve his thing,
no,
we have to waive
no,
the parking.
Chris, no.
I thought we were, is this temporary or permanent?
Letting you know that there is a parking study that is coming was an informational thing that hopefully will help you decide whether you do or do not want to approve this particular request.
All right, so let me rephrase,
No,
because
Miss-
I'm asking.
I'm sorry, may I just, because I think it might be important if I finish the answer to the first question.
All right.
You have an applicant, the applicant is entitled, and, there's another one of those words I don't necessarily love, but is actually entitled to make a request to you, and you must act under your ordinance on that request within 30 days of that request coming in. This applicant originally submitted their request at your May the 26th meeting. So you need to take a yes or no vote by June the 26th on whether you do or don't want to do this. You definitely will not have the traffic study by June the 26th. So if you believe that that is an essential item for your decision, you should vote no.
That wasn't my question, but thank you for trying to explain. The question I had, maybe it was already answered, was, is this going to be a temporary thing or permanent?
This particular request is permanent. It's a waiver. What you are really taking an action on is a waiving the parking in lieu fees.
So they can expand their
for
patio.
10 spaces, yes.
And that would have an impact on parking long-term, wouldn't it?
Of 10
That's why I
spaces.
kept referring back to the parking study, but thank you for your insight. And by the way, just to clarify, because I know this is going to come, but there are certain individuals in the community that they can't help themselves. I, for one, do not have a conflict of interest in this particular situation. In the past, I would recuse myself from anything having to do with Solvang Brewing Company because I had done some work for them as a consultant. But I do not have any equity interest in the company. I've never invested in the company. I've never been an employee of the company. And I have not been paid by them in probably 18 months. So consequently, I want to make sure that when I vote, nobody has any doubt or confusion about my conflicts.
But if there's ever a doubt, and if it crosses your mind, then it's probably best to recuse yourself.
I don't have any doubts.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Clark, I would just note, Councilmember Johnson had a question in his mind. I don't believe that he actually has a conflict, but because he even questioned it, my suggestion to him was that the better action, the more ethical action, is simply to recuse yourself if you even have a question. And this area, it's so easy to slide over the line because, for example, this is a restaurant. If you happen to, if
Eat.
you happen to eat there and over the course of 12 months, you got 2 free dinners a month or something like that, it very quickly you get to the $500 level. I'm not saying that has happened. Again, Mr. Johnson's question had to do with his company's business representation. And again, I don't believe that he in fact has a conflict, but my suggestion, just the very fact that anybody was even questioning it, that he was questioning it, the better part of valor is to recuse yourself.
And the proper process for that is he can write the FPPC for formal determination and then know formally from the FPPC whether or not he has a conflict,
That is correct,
which takes about 2 weeks.
which absolutely couldn't happen tonight, though.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything else on this item?
No.
Karen?
No, I mean, I think that they're working hard together as business neighbors. They aren't the only business neighbors that, Bill, that you'll have to contend with. If you have outdoor music, it's going to affect every single business around you, from the Lansby to any eating establishment within earshot, plus housing. So I guess the best thing to do is bring it forward and take a look at it and have it be reviewed and see if it flies.
And there will be several coming forward.
I would like to
Rob?
avoid. Are we voting on this tonight?
Yep.
Yes.
I have an issue with the music, though. I'm all for opening up outdoor patio seating. I'm all for allowing restaurants to expand and hopefully get enough tables to try and break even at least during this crisis. But I think that with the proximity of other close restaurants, I have no problem at all with an event with a permit for music. But you've got one of our Jewel hotels right across the street. You've got other restaurants that are real close by. It's a tight, crowded area, which is, God bless all of the restaurants that are in that area. But I'm not in favor of having music on that patio. I can't.
And then I would disagree with you because if you remember last year, and I really enjoyed this, there were some live music performances over at Dana Volk's place and over at the Sanger Winery, and I'm not sure where else, but the point is there was plenty of live entertainment, which was fantastic, and I think it brought a lot of attention to that corridor and a lot of visitors that probably may not have gone there in the first place. So I feel quite comfortable in contrast.
May I make a
Actually, please, I'd like to
Yeah,
know.
we're deliberating now, but I just had a few more things, and I will let you. My position on this is, we've been, prior to COVID or during COVID. I mean, this is about experiential tourism. We want compelling reasons. We want people to see experiences. We want people to see people out on the patio having dinner, having a reason to stop and solving. So I'm all for this particular project, but I think, as we go through these changes, there's some things that we do need to address. I mean, obviously, I think we've already poked some holes in the smoking ordinance, and I think that there's some value in putting some conditions in here regarding the smoking to help ensure that, as, for example, in this particular case, Solvang Brew, who has succulent on one side, wandering dog on the other side, which is like this little sliver, and then you have Paula's Pancakes there, and Olson's. That what's happening there is still neighbor friendly. And so we don't want to see, we don't want to encourage people to be out on the patio and then out there smoking, and then that's interfering with the people trying to have a nice dinner next door. We also, I love live music, and I watch it happen on 246 all the time. It happens out in front of Dana Volk, the Lansby does it. I think that's great, but we need to come up with ways of creating, neighbor-friendly policies around this. We don't want it to turn into battle the bands every night between, Succulent trying to put something on their corner, and Solvang Brew doing their thing, and then the Lansby doing their thing, and then that's just going to turn into kind of a little bit of a mess there. So I think we need some kind of process, and that's not. Those processes aren't here tonight for us to necessarily, vet through, but I think that some of these things we can push over the Planning Commission and let them go through a process that maybe they want to make a recommendation back to the council for. But I do think that we need to have some of those conditions on this project in order to give security to the neighbors that this isn't going to turn into a detriment.
And that's a good point, because Mr. Rogers mentioned that he wanted to reopen by the 25th. There's another meeting on the 22nd. There's probably a planning commission meeting between now and then. It might be something that need to be fine-tuned and come back to us for one final decision.
Well, okay, that's fine.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Clark, I would suggest that you do tonight take action on the parking waiver issue.
That's fine.
You don't need to take action on the music issue if you want to. I'm assuming that the ABC approval for the change in again, I'm forgetting what the exact title is, but the area that you're allowed, the premise. My understanding is that they are, during COVID-19, they're allowing expansion of premises without having to go through the process of a new letter from the city. So you could defer that, and your staff could come back with what the recommended conditions are for the permit, and you could see those on the 22nd.
Okay. And I'll add one last.
Just very, very briefly, thank you, Council. Councilmember Clark, I just wanted to note that on a regular basis, on busy weekends and holiday times, that right across the street next to the Lansby, there are always acoustic musicians out there. And it doesn't interfere with our business. I don't know if it interferes with the Succulents business, but they're there all the time. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about. There's maybe an acoustic player out there. We're not talking about all the bands. So, we wouldn't want to.
My reference, just for clarification, is just having, everyone now competing over having bands playing at their, that was what I'm referring to.
You don't
as
want
battle
me out
bands.
there singing, that's for sure.
Like Jones Beach on Long Island. 900 boom boxes in a
Been there,
two-block period.
been there.
It's very funny.
I've surfed Jones Beach lots of times. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm okay with moving forward with this, but I think that we need, my two sticking points is going to be the smoking issue. I think this is the appropriate time to actually put a condition on there to make sure that smoking or or no smoking ordinance, or, you know, however you want to call it, that's not what's going to be happening out on that patio, and that's not going to be the other businesses are going to have to, you know, people sitting at those tables are going to have to smell smoke coming from people at the expanded patio. The other is just the noise issue. I think the smoking one's pretty easy at the staff level for that to be dealt with, but the noise issue probably might be appropriate to run through the planning commission for recommendations. But I'm open to anything else.
The planning commission's next meeting, I believe, is on July the 6th. So again, my understanding, and I look to Mr. Rogers to confirm this, but his need for a letter to ABC will be for the after COVID period. And so you probably have at least weeks. You have until after July the 6th for that. So we wouldn't need to come back to you as quickly as June the 22nd with that issue. The live music simply wouldn't be included in the new permit, and that would come back to you before that gets added.
Well, I'm confused. So you're going to prevent them from having live music unless they have a permit? But we're not going to require that from other people on the quarter, like the Sanger Winery, wine tasting, or Danable wine tasting?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Dearness, right now the city doesn't control anybody. It's very odd. But the Alcoholic Beverage Commission out of Sacramento does impose conditions in certain permits which are within 100 feet of residences. And it turns out that actually both of these restaurants, as I understand, which happen to be on the north side of 246, are within 100 feet of residences. So ABC imposed, actually I think at the request of former city staff, that as a condition in those permits. The issue that would be before you after we have the chance for the Planning Commission to talk about this and come back to you with a recommendation is whether you would suggest to the ABC that the city can do a better job of putting in conditions and deciding how music could be addressed rather than it being the one-size-fits-all ABC restriction. And that's something, again, that doesn't need to be decided this evening. What needs to be decided this evening is whether you're going to waive the parking fee or not.
Okay.
Thank you for that excellent summation. That was
Thank you.
great.
So, just in line with where I was headed with, I mentioned the two issues. It seems like the table seemed to agree with me there. Can you just make a recommended motion for me that would follow that planning process that you kind of outlined?
My recommendation is that if your council, and again, this is entirely a policy decision by your council, if your council wishes to do so, that you act to waive either some or all of the in lieu parking fee, and that you direct staff to include a condition in this permit that would, either through the project description or otherwise, would preclude smoking in the patio area, and that staff come back to you with further recommendations related to both music and the city smoking ordinance.
Okay.
And that we take that to the Planning Commission, I think, before we bring it back to you.
Okay. So I'm comfortable with moving the recommended language there.
I'll second
Is
it.
that your motion?
Yes.
I'll second it.
That's been seconded.
Mayor Protem Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember DeJarnis.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson recused himself. Councilmember Waite,
Yes.
Mayor Toussaint.
Yes.
This is 4.
Okay. With that, we'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back. Are we ready to resume?
Yes.
We are moving on to item number 6, COVID.
So yes, it's number item 6 now, which is a COVID update. I do not have any additional updates. This was just a placeholder as things change in case we need to take, or the council need to take action, but there's no further report.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question about the food distribution? How is that going? And do we need to keep doing this?
Food distribution, as far as your one-time donation of the $40,000 is complete now that the businesses are reopening. And that I can bring back some statistics on that with at the next agenda, just to give you an update. And then Great Plates program is still going. I know about a week ago, it was up to 26 people. And there are some options to continue that for some period of time. So that could be also part of your update at the next council meeting.
I guess the question is, are we doing distributions out of the vet's parking lot again?
No, right
That's
now
done.
That's over.
those are done.
All right, thank you.
And for the Great Plates program, how's that working for the restaurants and the seniors taking advantage of the program so far? Have you heard any feedback or?
So far, all the seniors have definitely been happy. I think there's only been one unhappy remark with, one of the items on the food. But generally speaking, I think people are pretty appreciative of having those services. Yes.
That's very funny.
Yeah. And the restaurants are definitely saying that it does help
Okay.
for those who are.
Yeah.
The items are free to the seniors. Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of a dual purpose. It takes care of some of the struggling seniors while also keeping some of our restaurants going. So, is there anything else? Okay, receive and file. Move on to
Item number 7 now.
7 now, which is the general municipal election.
Right, so this
Okay.
is really a procedural item which is required for setting of the general election, which will be on November 3rd, 2020. And there is 5 very specific items in this packet. Once again, procedural required by law. Number 1 is to adopt resolution calling for the holding of a general municipal election to be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, for the election of certain officers as required by the provisions of the law of the State of California relating to charter law cities, and for the submission of the qualified voters a proposed ordinance. Item number 2 is to adopt a resolution requesting the Board of Supervisors of the County of Santa Barbara to render specific services to the city relating to the conduct of a general municipal election to be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. Item number 3 is to adopt resolution requesting the Board of Supervisors of the County of Santa Barbara to consolidate the general municipal election to be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, with a statewide general election to be held on that date pursuant to the Elections Code 10403. Number 4 is to adopt resolution adopting regulations for candidates for elective office pertaining to candidate statements submitted to the voters at an election to be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, and to adopt resolution providing for a procedure for determining by lot a tie among candidates at the November 3rd, 2020 consolidated general municipal election in accordance with Elections Code 15651. And if there's any questions, we are available to answer those. There's the details of each resolution for what would be on the ballot.
So just a matter of procedure, we forgot to go to public comment on the COVID-19 update. I'll allow for public comment on that after this item, but there's no one in the room anymore, and are there any callers on the line? So just as a matter of procedure, I'll just ask at the end of this item if there's any comment on that. Are there any questions of this staff report?
Yeah, actually, why are we, I love what you guys are doing here, but why wasn't this done in the past? Why wasn't this presented each election cycle?
I would imagine, I mean,
It
this
is.
it
Was
would
it
be
done in 2018?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I don't recall.
Are there any questions of the staff report? We'll go to public comment. Is there anyone online? There's no one in the room. Take it back for the council for discussion and action. I'll move staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll
procedural.
second it.
It's been seconded.
All right, Mayor Pro-Tem Clark. Councilmember DeJarnius.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Waite.
Yes.
Mayor Tusan.
Yes. Because we forgot to go to public comment on the COVID-19 item earlier, just as a formality, is there anyone that would like to comment on the item? Is there anyone on the line? There's no one on the line. That's done. We'll move on to the next item, which I believe is
Response?
item number 8.
So item number 8 is a review of a response to grand jury report that was addressed to actually all jurisdictions, all cities in the county of Santa Barbara. What you would be approving here is a response for the signature of the mayor to submit back to the grand jury. And the report of the grand jury that was submitted, request and response from the city, was on titled Cyber Attacks Threaten Santa Barbara County. All jurisdictions were requested to respond to this response, and so I'll just kind of go through some of these findings. Finding number 1 was ensuring critical cybersecurity tasks and activities are properly executed on a timely basis requires a designated individual to be accountable and responsible. The city does agree with this finding, and the recommendation 1 on that is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County designate an individual to be accountable and responsible to oversee cyber security. I would just mention that this year we have made a lot of progress on our IT infrastructure and cybersecurity in particular. So this action has already, or recommendation has been implemented. I am ultimately responsible point person for cybersecurity, but working closely with our new consultant who have multiple staff of different expertise on within their firm, including an expert in cybersecurity. And so they have been working with us to update our immediate cybersecurity needs, and will continue to work with us on developing specific cybersecurity strategic plan. Then there's finding number 2 is that most public entities within Santa Barbara County have an inadequate understanding of what communication and electronic systems they use and what data they maintain, and do not fully understand the risk, security issues, and costs associated with the destruction systems or loss of data. Once again, the city partially disagrees with this finding, as we can only speak to our own situation. Recommendation on this is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County complete a full inventory of their data, electronic and communication systems, and determine the related security risks. So we have completed inventory of our data, and we have also updated our backups to ensure that our backups are being done not only on premises but also off premises, to ensure that we have appropriate security risks or address the security risks. And then finding number 3 is some public entities within Santa Barbara County do not have a written cybersecurity plan. We do agree with this finding, and we are working on a written cybersecurity plan. We have not had any written IT procedures, including cybersecurity, so that's in the works and should be completed this summer. Recommendation number 3 is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County establish a written cybersecurity plan, and I just addressed that. It's the same as the finding. Finding number 4, nationally cyber attacks on governmental organizations have been successful for many years and are occurring with more frequency and sophistication. The city does agree with this finding, as we have heard, especially in the last year, multiple attacks on the cities that were pretty devastating. And then recommendation number 4 under that is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County take substantial steps to protect data from internal and external attacks or threats. The city does agree with this recommendation and is in process of or has updated its backup database. Finding number 5 is that cyber attackers use a number of methods to install malicious software on systems, including access through backdoors, staff or employee carelessness and known bugs in software. We do agree with this finding. The recommendation number 5 is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County install and maintain current antivirus software to detect malware and other threats. We have recently updated our antivirus software and have upgraded both an antivirus and the firewall to industry standards. Recommendation number 6 is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County install and update all operating software regularly. We are updating our software regularly, and we are also working that into the strategic plan on cybersecurity to ensure that we continue that and actually have it as a policy. Recommendation number 7 is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County periodically train employees and test their cybersecurity awareness. We are implementing new programs to where employees will be continuously trained and given tips on cybersecurity awareness. Recommendation number 8, that each public entity within Santa Barbara County periodically ensure electronic system-related contractors have been trained for cybersecurity awareness. We are in process of doing that. Finding number 6 is, if data is lost or compromised for any reason, including cyber attack, mechanical failure, or error, the most cost-effective and expedient way to recover is to have current data backups and to plan to reinstall it. Once again, we have our backups now that are backed up off-site on the cloud and are backed up in more than one cloud space. Recommendation number 6A is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County create and implement a full backup and recovery program. We have done that. Recommendation number 6B is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County regularly update and test their backup and recovery plan. We do have a continuous monitoring system now, and we do test our backups. Finding number 7, some public entities within Santa Barbara County do not have or adequate cyber insurance. We do, in fact, have adequate cyber insurance. Recommendation number 7 is that each public entity within Santa Barbara County secure adequate cyber. Oh, sorry, I just read that. Finding number 8, a cost-effective method to address cyber risks and concerns is to inform an information sharing and learning consortium. We agree with this finding and recommendation that even though we feel that our firm of multiple employees is a consortium of its own to where we have multiple experts on staff, but we also would be open to join a cybersecurity group with other Santa Barbara jurisdictions.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
No.
Okay.
Just a quick observation. When was this all done? I know that you've been working hard and fast to get this done. How long? It seems to me like you just put this in place pretty quickly, or you've been addressing it.
Right. Well, I think I think we as the city have begun this work very timely. As you would recall, we started to make changes at about November of 2019 when we contracted with our new IT firm. And one of the first steps was doing an initial assessment where our consultant identified a number of areas where there was vulnerability, as well as needed just upgrades to be more modern and to be at industry standards. And so since then, we've been addressing those. And most recently, when we fully transitioned to Landspeed being our servicer for all IT processes, we've been able to really dig into the data, understand where things were, and addressed actually a few major issues as far as backup and cybersecurity and knowing where our data is and our weaknesses and opportunities. So this has been in the works, and now we were very well set up for this report, which the grand jury did a great job at identifying some of the issues within Santa Barbara County, and we were well poised and prepared to respond to this.
Well, I wanted to thank you and your staff for getting out in front of this. This is something that we had talked about on the campaign trail, trying to improve our city services and be more automated, improve our IT systems against this kind of threat. So thank you again for doing that so quickly. I guess in the last 6 or 7 months. It's amazing how fast you guys got this done.
We'll take this to public comment. Was there anyone on the line? There's no one in the room. Take it back for just council discussion and action. I think it's a rather straightforward item. Move that we accept the report.
I move we accept the report.
Is that your?
When I move, we accept the report.
I'll second the motion.
It was,
We have three motions on the floor for the same thing. How should I proceed?
Draw straws.
I'll take Daniel's second
I'll accept the motion of the mayor.
With your motion.
with my motion.
Okay. So moved by the mayor, seconded by
I'm gonna
Councilmember
vote no
Johnson.
now.
Yes.
Mayor Protem Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember DeJarnius.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Waite.
Yes.
Mayor Song.
Yes. With that, oh wait, did we oh yeah, we went to public comment. Okay, and then with that, we'll go to AB 1234, council member comments. Again, I don't think there's any events taking place the city would have paid for, so I think there's nothing to report out for AB 1234. Council comments. Who would like to start?
I only have one comment. Earlier we heard some remarks by a Mr. Clayton Jones, and I just wanted to, I'm in full support of his remarks, and I do think that the state and the county have overstepped their bounds and violated the Constitution. And I supported him wholeheartedly in what he was saying, that we need to be very vigilant with our freedoms and keep an eye on these organizations that are imposing things that they are not legally able to do so.
My comment is exactly what Daniel just said, and it's funny how at the time, we drafted a letter to ask for more local control, and the barrage of emails about how we're opening up the floodgates and we're not doing what Governor Newsom says. A lot of these same people have council derangement syndrome because they were just so apoplectic when we tried not to follow the governor's rules by just trying to take some local control. And I think we did push for that at that time. So God bless Mr. Jones for saying that. What he said, it's true, but there's a lot of ramifications for a town like ours and getting in a lot of trouble. But I was wholeheartedly up for this city doing what we did. And I just hope we can get through this faster.
Karen or Chris?
Sure. I just want to say I am looking forward to our workshops on the 27th, and I really, really hope a lot of our residents and the public throughout the valley show up for this.
I want to echo what Daniel and Robert were saying. I felt equally strongly from the very beginning. I don't think anybody could have said it more eloquently than Mr. Jones. Secondly, with respect to Deborah Dayet's comment about acknowledging any conflicts of interest with respect to the project, the VETS project, I'll be clear and upfront with everybody. I don't have any connection with Mr. Ed St. George. I don't have any conflicts of interest there. I just want to make sure she understands that. And then also, one of the interesting things that happened, I guess I was accused of some kind of an FPPC violation, right? Having to do with Form 700. And that, to my knowledge, that's been cleared up. And I wanted to make sure that everybody understood publicly that I didn't violate anything. I don't owe any money and no fines, and it simply required me to amend my Form 700 because they themselves weren't clear on the rule. So, ironically enough, my case helped the FPPC to clarify their own rules, and that's now put to bed.
And I did take a little Cocker Spaniel dog named Checkers, and I'm not giving it back. Oh, Khrushchev.
Okay. And my only comments for tonight, one, just regarding UGB, just want to thank everyone for all their hard work. And that's been an item that's been going on for quite some time. One of the concerns regarding that item is that if those flats aren't developed, it's all going to turn into cannabis tomorrow. And I believe there's a lot of steps taking place at the county to make sure that does not happen. But the same people that were just as passionate about the UGB now need to be just as passionate and on the county to make sure that does not happen. I don't believe it will happen, but they are still working through, to my understanding, some of those ordinances and stuff like that. So, they need to now focus their energy there, and I think that would be well served for Solvang. And then also, yes, I do look forward to the workshops, and I just hope the community understands that, as we look into making things sustainable and viable into the future, we do have to make things pencil out. And given everything that's happening right now, and where things were at, that calls for tough decisions. They're not easy, and we're all just trying to do our best to make the right decisions. and make things sustainable fiscally. So with that, that's it. We're adjourned.
Nice comments, Ryan.